another book club episode. I'm back again with my guest, author of her newest book that just came out, Cover Story. Please welcome Celia Laskey. Celia, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I
Now,
do love to read, ever since I was a kid. Was there a part two to that question that I'm forgetting?
yeah, your relationship to reading now.
Oh, it's funny. I feel like I lived in New York City for like a decade, and I feel like I read so much during my commute to and from work
Mm.
because my commute was 2 hours a day. It was an hour
Oh,
there and an hour
wow.
back on the train. Yeah. And so I would read for 2 hours a day usually. And now that I don't have a commute, I feel like people in LA do spend a lot of their time commuting, but luckily I don't because I just work from home. Um, I have to really be more intentional about
Mm.
carving out my reading time. So usually what I do now is at night, like after I've eaten dinner, I just turn off the TV and for either a half hour or an hour, I'll just read. And on the weekend, I can usually get more reading time in. But yeah, now these days, I have to much more intentionally be like, this is reading time.
And because it's intentional, do you, while you're writing, read outside of the genre you're writing and then like you turn in a manuscript and you can read in that genre again? Or how does that work?
Oh, I don't find that I have an issue with that. I know a
Okay.
lot of people talk about how, like, sometimes if they're writing a certain kind of book, they don't want to read that
Hmm.
same kind of book or anything. But I just tend to read whatever I want to read.
What are some
And
of your favorite books and what kind of genres do you like to read? Give us a general idea.
Well, I would say that these days, gay literary fiction is sort of like my sweet spot. It's
Hmm.
so amazing now that like I can go an entire year basically of reading only queer books if I want to.
Hmm.
And that just was not true
Yeah.
like a decade or so ago. Like it takes a lot for me to read. Like I generally don't read anything by cishet white men anymore.
Mm.
Just like I
Yeah.
just don't. And that's yeah, pretty
Amazing.
much like gay literary fiction is my jam. And like I was saying before, probably my least favorite genre is mysteries or like
Oh,
thrillers,
okay.
especially murder mysteries, just because I
Okay.
find that those there's so many of them that are relying on withholding information from the reader that doesn't need to be withheld, and that drives me nuts.
Got it. Because
Yeah.
there's going to be a portion of this, and maybe we'll jump into it soon, but where I give you book recommendations and I always give my guests book
Oh,
recommendations.
yay.
So it's
So
this
fun.
is where I'm doing my research literally now. I had a couple
Oh,
for you,
wow.
but I'm doing my research now. So
Oh,
like three
yeah.
things you love to see in a story.
Mm. Oh gosh. This one is stumping me because I feel like there's not anything that will really make me pick up a book other than it just like being queer. Um,
I think that's the
yeah.
title of this episode. I like couldn't think of a better title for this episode. Book you
Okay,
would
good.
like to read again for the very first time.
Okay, let me check my notes. Guess I would probably just say Milk Fed by Melissa Broder.
Mm,
Um,
what's that about? Never heard of it.
that Oh my God. I think if you liked Cover Story, you would
Okay.
you would love this one. It's about this woman with an eating disorder who goes to this frozen yogurt shop every day as her one like indulgence, and she gets
Mm.
like the super low calorie frozen yogurt
Hmm.
that she can eat. And one day there's this fat woman working there, and they sort of start this romance together. And it's just like I mean, have you ever read anything by Melissa Broder?
I don't think so.
Oh my goodness. She
Okay.
is one of the most hilarious writers writing today, I think. And she's
Death
queer,
Valley
so
is on my list. So that I
yeah,
recognize
I would not
visually.
I would say don't start with that one
Okay.
because she's getting like sort of deep in that one in
Okay.
a way that like I don't know, maybe that's your thing, but I feel like I would recommend people like start with Milk Fed because I
Okay.
just think that like every single word of that book is like perfection.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't change a thing. So yeah, erase my brain and give it to me again.
Well, now it's time for me to give you book suggestions and let's see what
Yes.
you think. So, starting off with, it's called Hot Summer by Elle Everhart, and it is a
Okay.
queer love story. And my favorite part about this is that the story takes place, she was a guest on this podcast. The story takes place in a very similar environment to Love Island, the reality show.
Ah, nice.
And so the main character, Cass Morgan, is basically she works in the industry in the UK and decides to go on this show. And if she does, she gets like this giant promotion if she like wins at the end, right? And she goes and she meets a bunch of different characters, and the characters are very reminiscent of those on this kind of show, and it's very funny. But then she ends up falling for one of the female characters on the show, and kind of how does that come out? And is she gonna, give away her possible promotion for this love story? So it was fun. I love Love Island, so I loved the story, but that's a
It
fun
sounds
romance.
fantastic.
The next one is called Our Infinite Fates by Laura Steven. And this one I read in January. I think it just came out like at the end of February.
Okay.
And it is about two characters who, Evelyn and Arden, and it's really hard to explain, but basically they follow each other through every lifetime. And in every lifetime, they're born a different person, a completely different person, a completely
Well, this
different.
lines up with my new spiritual beliefs.
Yeah, they're born a different person, a different gender, a different race, in a different country and a different time period throughout time. And they're not always born kind of together, but they get to
find their way.
Yeah, they find their way to one another. And specifically, Evelyn never makes it to 18 because Arden kills her before she makes it to 18 in every lifetime. But they also are in love. So in every lifetime, she's killed by the person she loves.
Oh shit.
And you're trying to figure out why. And you see them throughout moments in history as different people. And it's just, it's like heartbreaking and beautiful. And also it was very, very good.
Can I ask, is Arden a man?
So here's the thing.
I guess sometimes not. Yeah.
Neither is Evelyn. So like they're different.
Oh yeah.
So I think so, and I can't tell you kind of their origin story without telling you like the plot, like why this happens. But yes, they have different lives for many centuries. And
basically what I'm trying to ask is there ever some queer love going on in the book?
Yes, there is queer love in this book. Yes, for
amazing. Sure. Sold then.
It's beautiful. I will say I loved every part of this book until the end. And that's all I'll say.
Oh, damn. Okay.
But I didn't hate the end, but it wasn't my favorite part. That's all I'll say.
You've got me very intrigued. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Now, the next one also just came out, like, I think 2 days ago. And it's called Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reed. I don't know how you feel about sci-fi, but I
like it.
Okay. Yeah. And I think it's more on the YA side, but like I love dystopian or sci-fi. And it's kind of a lesbian Hunger Games is how I would describe it. Okay. So you have our two main characters. So Melanie or Mel is basically this like human turned assassin robot by the rich people in this country or in this world. And then her job, along with the other kind of robots like her, is there's a gauntlet, and somebody is nominated into the gauntlet by somebody else, like their family or friends, based on the fact that they have debts with this country, and it's televised, and she kills them. And
so very Hunger Games.
Very Hunger Games, but it's told through her perspective and then our other character. And through her perspective, you can see that she's grappling with like her humanity and like having to kill somebody, or, relationships she's built, and kind of it feels very wobbly. And I think that's one of my favorite parts, is that you do see her perspective, and like she is a full character in it. And then the other character in it is, I'm trying to remember her name, Inessa. So Inessa is the other character in this, and she is nominated by her mother for
Oh
the
God.
gauntlet. Yeah. And
Hmm.
so her and her brother are very, very close, and he kind of helps her at the beginning of this gauntlet. And they go on this journey. And then at one point in time, her and Mel form some sort of relationship or for survival. And you
Hmm.
see things kind of grow from there. But
Hmm.
seeing both of their perspectives in both of their points of view, I think is like the strongest part of this story, if I say so
Cool.
myself. Yeah. But it was very good. One of my favorites for the year, I think. That and Infinite Fates are my two favorites for January and February by far. And then the next one, I don't know if you'll like it after all I've learned about you, but why I feel like you may like it is because it's has such a literary aspect to it.
Mm.
So it's called What a Way to Go by Bella Mackey. And
Okay.
it is about this man who is a rich man who dies at a party.
Mm.
And we kind of open the scene with his death. And
Mm.
then the rest of the book is told through his wife's perspective, where he was awful. He cheated on her. He was rich. He was
Oh.
pompous. He was arrogant. And she is annoyed by it, but also have to grieve and deal with it. An amateur sleuth who's trying to figure out what happened and like tell this story. And then my favorite part, his point of view. He is in this limbo stage before death, and he is watching over as
Oh.
everybody is kind of figuring out what happened to him. So you really
Mm.
get to know the arrogant man that like everybody's talking about, and get to hear him be arrogant and talk about the affairs as somebody's meeting, a mistress. And it was just a almost comedic way of telling this man's
Yeah.
story, and I
It can
really
be
enjoyed it.
really fun to write a terrible character.
It was
Mm.
so great. And so I really enjoyed it. But it is kind of a, I would say, literary mystery. Like it's, do
Okay.
you
Yeah.
think the book is always better than the movie?
Oh, does it have to be movie or could it also be like TV
Yes,
show?
either one.
Frequently, I actually think that like quote unquote less good books make fantastic adaptations. And
Mm,
I sort of think like the more literary the book, the worse the adaptation is going to be. And the more sort of like best-selling and genre-y the book is, the better the adaptation is going to be. Like,
interesting. Okay.
and I don't actually know this for a fact. I've never read any of like Liane Moriarty's books, so I
Okay.
don't know like if they're super not literary, but I know that like they're bestsellers. A lot of people read them, and I
Okay.
feel like her books make really good,
Maybe I don't
TV
know any
shows.
of which books are hers.
So like Big Little Lies was
Oh,
based on
yes.
one of her
Yes.
books.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I feel like there's just like a lot of them now that are sort of slated.
Hmm.
So yeah, I sort of feel like is there's a lot of better adaptations actually out there.
Okay. I like that answer,
So
though. I
okay.
think, what is a book on your list you want to read next? What is the last really good book you read? And what are
Hmm.
you reading right now?
Okay. So the last really good book I read, I just finished it a couple days ago, was James by Percival Everett.
Okay.
And that book knocked me flat on my ass. I
Hmm.
cannot believe how good it was. Do you know
I've never
anything
read
about
it.
it?
No.
It's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn through Jim's eyes
I
and
never even,
names.
I don't even read Huckleberry Finn, to be fair.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't need to have
Another,
any.
another, like, I feel like classic
Yeah, yeah.
almost.
Well, honestly, you don't really need any familiarity with Huckleberry Finn to read and
Okay.
appreciate this book. But
Okay.
I just feel like it was a work of absolute genius.
Okay.
And yet it was so accessible. Like I could recommend it to my mom, knowing that it wouldn't like go over her head with all these things,
Oh,
like
okay.
I feel like anyone could pick it up and appreciate it. And at the same time, it is a work of absolute genius.
Okay, note to self. I'm glad I get
Yeah,
to listeners write the show notes and have a list of all the books that we discussed, because I get to go back and like look over it. So,
yeah. And now I forgot the other two questions. Can you remind me?
what are you reading right now and what's next on your list?
Okay, so what's next on my list is very surprisingly a book by a straight white man,
Oh my
which, like I
gosh,
told you,
contradicts. Yeah.
I barely ever read those. But my lesbian like close friend was like, I just read The Overstory by Richard Powers, and it was just like the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Apparently, it's all
Mm,
about trees, and it's
yeah.
sort of like structured like a tree. We go from like the roots to the trunk to the branches, and I'm
Mm,
sort of obsessed with trees.
mm.
Uh, like living things in general, like plants and flowers and trees, I would say. I'm obsessed with all of them. But she really piqued my interest.
Okay.
So,
I recognize
but,
the cover. Well, Celia, thank you so much for being here again and giving me any ounce of your time, but definitely this like full hour and a half, almost 2 hours of your time. Now, before I let you go, can you tell people where they can find you and where they can get your books?
yes, probably the easiest thing to do is just go to celialasky.com. And I've got all the different books there, and you can order them. And I think I have links to my social media too, but I'm not like
Okay.
super active on social media. So
Okay.
my books are the best way to really find out about me.
Awesome.